name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen.
Amen.
All right, everyone, welcome back to Nets in the Water. I am John Barreto, your host. Today we have Patrick Phelan on the podcast. Pat, thank you so much for coming on.
Yeah, this is going to be awesome.
Yeah, I'm really excited about it. So for those of you guys at home, Patrick Phelan is a campus minister / theology teacher. Graduated from Notre Dame in 2018, 2019? 2018. Went over and was campus minister at the all-girls Catholic high school here in Tampa, Academy of the Holy Names. And then came over to Jesuit Tampa, where I went to high school. And you were a theology teacher for a couple of years. Now you're a campus minister. And I get the privilege of calling you friend.
Yes, this is great to be able to do this with a friend.
Yeah,
Don't
it's
have
very
to feel
fun.
awkward about this. We can just go into these conversations, and it's great to have a friend and just to dialogue with this. Yeah,
no, it'll be good. So, yeah, thanks so much for coming on. Really appreciate it. I guess just to open it up a little bit for stuff that I don't know, because I'm not good at having these regular conversations outside of a recorded podcast for an hour. How did any of this come about? I don't even know when you came back to your faith. Maybe you never left your faith. Maybe you were homeschooled. I don't know how you work.
Yeah. So I grew up in San Diego, California. I would say I was baptized Catholic. Grew up going to Catholic church as a kid. I remember when I was 5, my dad was not going to mass, and my mom was faithfully taking us to mass. And I had a tantrum, and I yelled at my mom, and I said, "Why do I have to go to mass if Dad doesn't go to mass?" And from then on, as my dad was a good father, a good husband, he was in mass with us every single Sunday, and we never missed a mass after that. And it was more of a routine for me, something I just did with my family. I think became a serious and real thing for me, and something that became personal was in youth ministry in California when I was a junior in high school. We got a new youth minister, brought Life Team to the parish, which was a very pivotal thing for me in high school and into college. Went off to college because of this youth minister to study theology with the hope of being a youth minister, and got involved with Life Team Camp. So all of this is very pivotal for me growing up, and it is a very important part of my story. The impact that Life Team had, the impact that community had, the impact of seeing the faith alive and not something that's boring, and was something for me. And so then after college, moved down here to Tampa, and began that mission of being a youth minister. Started off in youth ministry at St. Mark and in Nativity here in Tampa. And was
St. Mark
minister
over in New Tampa?
Yeah, New Tampa.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I was there for 2 years. That was my ECHO placement. So my grad school sent me to a parish to work for 2 years. So we didn't choose.
Whoa.
I had no choice.
It's a total flashback, because back at Corpus Christi, I remember now that we actually had, when I was in confirmation class, there was a girl from Notre Dame who came down.
I was
now
one of
remembering that was one of those. Wow.
I was one of those. Yeah, so it's called ECHO. Great program. Did my grad school in the summers, and then we worked at parishes and community for 2 years. It was a great transition from this high power life of Life Team, which was very charismatic, and into something where I still had community post college, but it was a little more rooted. I had a full-time job. Mm-hmm. I was working and living life as a normal person in Florida as an adult, and from there moved into full-time youth ministry, and that's how I ended up in Tampa. Mm-hmm.
Did you want to come to Tampa, or did you just...
That was my first placement. Some people did not want to,
okay.
People didn't get their first placements. I was very thankful.
Yeah. Did you had you been to Tampa before? Why did you end up choosing Tampa?
I chose Tampa because of all the people that I knew from Life Team that lived here.
So you never really had a major point though where you were away from your faith?
No, I would say the big moment, if to eventually talk about community liberation, was in 2020 with COVID. That was a really tough year for me spiritually. I really started questioning a lot of things. Was in youth ministry, but we weren't doing anything. Hopefully my former employer doesn't hear that. But we wasn't really doing much. Was at home, trapped inside of a home the whole time. And my faith for me, for my entire life, was I got to do things. I got to do holy things. I have to go to mass. I got to pray. And if I'm not doing these things, then I'm not holy. Then I'm not Catholic. And so for those things to fall away, made me question a lot of things. It made me question so many things, and I really was in I would say a dark place spiritually and in my faith in 2020. And that's when Community Liberation, that's when I met the movement. And it really changed my perspective. And the way that I met it, I had a friend, his name was Patrick Lambert. He doesn't live here anymore, but he'd been going to Community Liberation since he was in seminary for he's been going for over a decade. And he would always bug us. He's like, you guys got to come. Like, you'd love it. And we'd dismiss it. We'd be like, no, it's a cult that you go to, man. Like, we're not going to that cult thing. No. And we were like, you hang out with these old people and you smoke cigarettes and, what do you guys do? Like, this seems so weird. And I'd always dismissed ministry as well, doing extra ministry because I was so involved with ministry. And so I was just
to walk it back for a second.
Yeah.
What even is Community Liberation? People click on the video because they don't know. No one knows. No one can describe it to me. I've asked so many people. I can't get an answer. What is it? What is Community Liberation?
Community Liberation is an official charism of the church.
What does that mean?
Who knows? No, I'm just kidding. Charisms became a part of the church and defined. They've always been a part of the church, but defined after Vatican II, and which are firm spiritualities that the church ordains, essentially, or says these are ways that you can practice the faith in special ways. So like Opus Dei is an official charism of the church. And if that's something that aligns with your spirituality, and the way that I heard it in Community Liberation was like the difference in the spirituality between Peter and John, right? The way that these two apostles had such different relationships with Christ, but yet were still in community. They were still a part of the church. Mm-hmm. In one of our retreats with Community Liberation, we talked about the story of Peter and John running to the tomb, and why John puts it in there that he runs faster than Peter. Is he just gloating? Is he just yes. Gloating that he's a track star? Probably, yes. Most likely.
I would.
But what the talk emphasized was that he gets to the tomb first. John gets there, but that he lets Peter go in first, right? And this is to emphasize his. John knows the primacy. John knows that Peter is the one that he is to follow, and so even if the spirituality is something that John differs from Peter, he's still in line with Peter. And so these charisms are maybe they're not different, but they're just emphasis. There's things that we emphasize differently in each charism. And they're still in line with the Catholic Church. They're not different. They're not separate.
So Community Liberation is approved by the Catholic Church when?
So
6 months ago.
Started, I think in the early 70s is what I. Okay. And I can tell you how it started and where it founded. Who founded it was Father Giussani. He was a priest in Milan, and he was this very intelligent priest, and he was teaching at a high level seminary to other seminarians. And he was on a train ride just home. He's overhearing a conversation between two young kids, high school age kids, and they're just he begins asking them questions about the Catholic faith and realizes they have no education in the Catholic faith, that they grew up Catholic, that Italy being a very Catholic place, right? But they have no idea what the Catholic Church teaches. They don't have any understanding. They don't have a relationship with Christ. They just, I'm Catholic, but they don't know anything. Mm-hmm. And so he's just he's completely blown away by this experience, and he just drops everything. And he says, I'm going to go teach at a public high school. So this high level, really intelligent priest who's working at a seminary says, I'm going to go work at a public high school.
At a public high school?
Yeah, in which in Italy, you still can. There's still the teaching of the Catholic faith in public high schools at the time.
I was gonna say, wouldn't you want to live out as a priest?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so he's still teaching. I believe he's teaching philosophy. He might be teaching theology. I'm not quite sure what he teaches in these schools, but really he comes in and it changes everything. He overhears 4 kids talking on the stairs of the school when he starts, and they're very passionately talking about Marxism and communism and defending it or arguing against it and identifying as one or the other politically and very invested, and they know their things. And so from there he goes up to them and he says, are you Catholic too? Are you a Catholic? And they're kind of coy about it. They're shy. They don't want to really say yeah, I guess I'm Catholic. And this just like changes everything for him. He encourages, he brings it out of the kids and says like, no, this defines everything, your Catholic faith.
Yeah.
This is not just something that's like in a little corner in your life, but something that has everything to do with life, has everything to do with your debate on communism and Marxism and other political ideologies. Your Catholic faith informs all of this. And he just had a way, he had a passion, and people followed him. Like it just blew up. Like people followed him everywhere, and these communities started to grow. Once these kids graduated from high school, this then went into universities, right? And then after that, there was adults that wanted to be part of this, and so it just continued to grow and grow and grow and grow.
What this like the concept that your faith informs everything?
Yeah, and so these meetings and these conversations that had just meaning on everything. I saw it was just, if this helps, this small example that happened today in my discipleship groups at Jesuit. We have kids that come into lunch and they talk about their faith, and we have faith conversations. And the recent presidential debate came up as always, and because they want to talk about these things always, and kids were arguing back and forth about certain things and joking around here and there. But then one of the kids said, "Oh, but like that's irrelevant." Like a kid made a statement about his faith that informed something regarding the political debate, and then one of the kids says, "Well, that's just your Catholic belief. Like that's just like that. Like that has nothing to do with this conversation." And I was like, "Whoa! Like no, that has everything to do with this conversation. The fact that you are Catholic informs everything that you do. It's not this like box like our politicians that are Catholic in our country make it as, right? Oh no, that's just my Catholic faith that's like over here, like." In essence, it does. Your life as a Catholic defines everything, and it changes
that's what Communion Liberation believes.
And that's what, that's the emphasis. That's the lens, right? It's not that the Catholic faith doesn't already preach this, right?
Yeah.
This isn't something
but it's
new.
An emphasis.
But it's a clear emphasis within Communion Liberation that your faith is something that anything in this world that is true, good, and beautiful is a way in which we encounter Christ.
Totally.
And it's like, once again, that's a transcendental. It's like, that's not new information, but it became such an emphasis for a world where secularism was becoming part of everything, and people were just becoming Catholic by name. And it just became this thing you kind of just do on the side, right? You're Catholic by name, but like you might go to mass here and there, but that's it.
That's like their hobby.
Yeah, it's a hobby. It's a side thing. It's a side gig, like it's nothing more than that. And so Jasani came in and he was just like, no, everything, pay attention. Like that's a big, pay attention to what's going on in your life. And this changed everything for these kids at the school. It changed everything for me in COVID when I was in this really tough spot. And it's a beautiful way to look at the world.
Now, something that I still kind of struggle to understand with these charisms is like, why do you need a new like group about it? Like I think I like in my own mind, and this is probably some level of ignorance, but it's like part of me is frustrated of like, why do we keep making new groups and new ways for people to think that they're separate from other Catholics rather than just emphasizing it as part of our Catholic faith and keeping it in one bundle? Like, why do we keep making new classifications of like, oh, you like to make your work your prayer, like, oh, you must be Opus Dei. And it's like, why can't you just be Catholic? Like, why can't seeing something through like Catholicism defines everything? Why does that have to be Communion Liberation? Why can't it just be like Catholic? Like, that's what it is.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good point. And I would say that the charisms of the Holy Spirit, right, is to, as we learn in Scripture, is to give out to all different kinds of people, right? And that the Catholic Church isn't just this like robotic thing that fits just this one mold, and there is a place for the Holy Spirit to move and to give gifts to all different kinds of people, right? And that you're not just you are Catholic. Like in the end, you are part of the Catholic Church, and to say otherwise is not what Communion Liberation would say at all, right?
Yeah,
it is very in line with the Church, and it's not something outside of the Church that's different, right? And I feel like I'm very blessed in my life to have such different emphasis in my life of I grew up in Life Team. I went to a Holy Cross school, which had a complete charism of the cross, right? And this kind of charism in their life. And then did, like I said, life team camps, moved to Tampa. I've been very influenced now with the Jesuits at Tampa Jesuit, and now Community Liberation. And so all of these things just like have made the Catholic Church so much more expansive to me, right? There's just so much more depth and richness. Like the Catholic Church is not limited in itself, that there's just so much treasure to be discovered. And these gifts of the Holy Spirit working, that's what a charism is, right? It's a gift of the Holy Spirit to broaden the church, to bring more light into the church, that Jesus is already there, is already shown, but it's to expand and to show more. And it's a gift of the church to bring others into the church, right? There might be people that, this is what they need in order to understand what Christ was saying, right? And maybe Opus Dei is what someone needs in order to understand what Christ was teaching, right? For me, it's not, right? But for somebody else, it might be.
Yeah.
And that's beautiful.
Okay. So to take it back to this name, because we've joked about this before the podcast started, it sounds very like, it sounds very like undefined. Like it seems so like,
oh yeah,
we're all just lovers here, man. Like we just want to pray with the Lord. Like what does communion and liberation mean?
Yeah,
as a name.
Communion and liberation is this idea that through your faith, that Christ has become real within the people around you. That Christ is incarnate. That's a living faith. That it's not just something that's in the past. For me, growing up, not intentionally thought this, but I think deep down, I would admit that the Catholic faith was an ideology, maybe, was a set of teachings that followed that made rational sense, but it wasn't a living relationship. And communion, right? That aspect of communion is saying that no, Christ is present just as he was present to the apostles, right? He's present in my friends, in the people around me, and that through this I'm free. Through this I'm able to live freely. So
communion just doesn't refer to the sacrament of the Eucharist. It refers to just like a community relationship.
Yeah. Yep.
Frees you within your faith.
Yeah, it frees you. It makes the world so much more beautiful. It opens up and expands everything. Expands reality. It doesn't limit you. And that's the thing that I found with Community Liberation is that when I would go to these meetings, I'd gone to other young adult events, right? I'd gone to other things. And it was always a very particular crowd that would show up to these things, right? It's people that are very much in the same boat, right? And when I went to Community Liberation, there was such a vast difference of people that show up to these things. There's liberals, there's conservatives, there's old ladies, old men, there's young kids, there's people my age, there's married people, there's married couples, there's divorced people, there's everybody you can imagine is present there. And that was different for me, right? And so what does that say? It says that we're not afraid for what someone offers, right? That's not like, oh, you think this way? Well, we can't let you come to this group. Then we're not going to be able to do that, right? It's very much that through our relationships with others, we learn so much about what God is offering us in this world. And he becomes incarnate. Like he frees us. That's what frees us is this recognition of the incarnation.
Mm-hmm. I'm not seeing the connection between the community brings the freedom. Cool. And
we love freedom.
I'm all about it. And then the community is about how everything in the world is informed by your faith.
Wait, say that again?
Everything in the world, your worldview is informed by your faith.
Yes.
Those seem like two different topics.
How are they related is what you're getting at? The community and the freedom?
You describe the name, meaning like through community, you become free within the Lord.
Yeah.
But then you said that kind of what it's about at its heart is that through your faith, like you view the world through the lens of your faith, like it informs your worldview.
Yeah, definitely.
How do those
come together?
Those seem like two different concepts. It seems like you're like, they seem like two different concepts.
Yeah, so I would say that like nothing you can do in your faith is isolated, right? We had this conversation yesterday at Jesuit about the spiritual exercises, right? Which honestly I see so much similarities between Jesuits and Community Liberation. They probably would never hang out in a room together, but I think they're very similar. and we had this conversation of like, oh, what if someone with spiritual, like going through the spiritual exercises was like mentally ill, or what if they just took these spiritual exercises and went on a tangent, right? And like thought something completely different. And it's like the context of the spiritual exercises are supposed to be done in communion, like with the spiritual director, with somebody else. And so that's the aspect of communal liberation, is that it's through these friendships, it's through this community that I'm a part of, that I experience Christ, and that my experience is verified, right? And that it becomes real, and it becomes something that I can share, and it helps inform my faith. It helps change everything about my relationship with Christ.
So the foundation of like the practicals of communal liberation is the community.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
then through the community, you become free to live out your faith. And in living out your faith, it informs your whole worldview.
Yeah, and not even free to live out your faith, I think, is the wrong way of saying it. I think, let's put it this way. Okay, in my past experiences of Catholicism, and it had nothing to do with what Catholicism is. It just is the way that I perceived it, was that it was limiting, in a sense that I thought at times I felt like oppressed, right, by teachings of the church, or I felt like I questioned everything. I questioned everything about my life because of certain teachings, because of morality, because of my job, like all these things I started to question, right? And so what communal liberation and what the faith is supposed to do is then to say, no, I am free to live, right? I'm free to live and to make judgments, and then to bring it to the community. And in bringing it to the community, we can make a judgment on how God is at work. And I'm now not limited. I'm not confined to like to this place of I have to think about all my actions. I have to like overthink everything, my discernment, my vocation, all these things I have to overthink. In a sense, I can simply live and then judge, not by myself, but in community, to judge with others, to judge on how God is at work, and God is at work in everything that I do, and to then judge that reality in front of me.
Okay. How do you balance like making the judgment in community with like making good choices?
Yeah, exactly. You can't just like completely throw out morality,
Yeah, because
right?
you can't just like do what you're going to do for a month and be like, I'm going to figure
I'm
it
gonna
out
figure it out
community
then.
on
Yeah, I'll
Thursday.
figure it out then. Well, no,
Yeah.
we meet once a week and we talk, and that's the difference between any of these meetings that I've ever gone to, outside of like a Bible, like different from a Bible study that I would go to, is that I would go to these Bible studies and I'd go to these other things, and it would just be people trying to make like theological claims, like they want to try to make give me some kind of answer, right? And when I go to these meetings at Communal Liberation, it's really people just talking about their lives in context. So we read a text from Jasani every week, and then the proposal is this true or not? Live it out. Read the text and see if it's true by your life, not just because you intellectually reason that it's true, but go live and see if it's true. And this is a bold claim, right? And why is it bold? Because it's saying, God, I'm trusting you are real, and I'm trusting in the incarnation. I'm trusting that this is true. You have come, and that you are in everything that I do, that you are incarnate, that you are alive in all of my actions and in my simple job at work. You know, when I go get a beer with friends on the weekends, you know, when I wake up and want to go golfing, or if I wake up and have a phone call with my mother, like all of these things are things that I should pay attention to because they're from Christ. Everything.
It almost sounds like it's like this is probably mischaracterization, but it almost sounds like it's like a communal spiritual direction every week.
Yeah, and and honestly, I don't even think we there's not a lot of feedback that's given, which may sound contradictory, but
it's more just reflection.
It's more of like reflecting on like how this is true. Like we open up and say, okay, this part of the text I thought was true, or someone will say, I don't think this was true. I don't think this reflected my daily life.
Can you give me an example? Like, what do you mean by is it true or not? Like,
so we only read like a couple pages every week, and we're supposed to read it every single day.
The same couple pages?
The same couple pages to then make a judgment if it's true in my life or if it's not true in my life.
Do you have like a favorite one ever?
A favorite one?
I'll ask the question I want to ask. Do you have one that you can read?
Like one that I could read right now? Yeah, I could probably find one. Yeah.
John should shut up.
No. I appreciate it. I do appreciate. Yeah. Okay. So here we go. So this is like one of his main books is The Religious Sense. One of his main lessons is, if I could use my hands well,
Yes.
is that there's these arrows that are pointing up. He draws this on a chalkboard for his students, and Jasani does. And these arrows pointing up, and then there's this X at the top, and then there's an arrow pointing down from the X. And so this is his lesson to try to teach about the incarnation. But what the religious sense is those arrows going up, is that there's always something within humanity that's looking for something outside of itself. And that's inherently what the religious sense is saying, I recognize that there's something that I'm made for outside of myself.
Okay, I like that.
Okay, good. We got somewhere.
I like this.
Yeah, so there's something that I'm looking for, and so why that lesson was so important to me in coming into community liberation was that these arrows pointing up, oftentimes we think we have to build ourselves up to Christ. Like we have to do X amount of holy hours, and we have to do these certain types of prayers, and we have to not sin, and we have to do all these things perfectly, right? So that we can reach that thing. And in reality, what Jasani teaches is that X is obviously Christ. It crashes into the world, into that bottom plane, into our own existence. And so this becomes then a judgment that you have to make. Is this true or is this not true? And that's the point of these meetings with community liberation, is that, so that would be a lesson maybe that we read about, right? And then we come to the sense of like, okay, this is what Jasani's saying. Am I recognizing this in my daily life? And it's like, oh, wow, yeah, like in the first couple of weeks going in months, and I talk about it still, is that, wow, like I do put so much of my worth in my relationship with God based on the things that I do and based off of the holy actions that I make, right?
Mm-hmm. It's a classic blunder.
Yeah.
I do the same thing. Like, this is tracking in a major way.
Yeah. So it's like, and then you feel guilty. Mm-hmm. You got to pray harder. You have to do all these things better next time.
Okay.
And it's not that, like, I'm saying don't strive for holiness. It's like, that's not it at all. It's saying what community liberation is, and I think this is the main point, is with that blunder that so many of us make, we don't pay attention. We simply say, I messed up because I learned when I was in 10th grade morality class that so here's an example. I in college, I was like, I learned when I was a senior at my youth group, like, to never go to a dorm party. This is what my youth minister told me. He's like, don't go join a frat, don't go to a dorm party, don't do any of that, right? Like, don't go drinking in college, don't go do any of those things, right? Like, this is bad. And it's like, oh, that made sense, right? I learned underage drinking, bad. I learned that college life can be bad, right? And so what happens freshman year? You go to that dorm party, and then you come back and you're like, I am a piece of crap. Like, I did not live up to the expectations I put myself. Like, I'm the worst. I run to the confessional. Like, I'm just going to pray harder more, right? But what did I miss? I did not pay attention to anything. I did not pay attention to anything of why I went to that party. I didn't ask any questions. I didn't sit with it. I didn't talk to anybody about it. I just like remembered from 12th grade theology and youth group that, like, that's bad, right? And so therefore I'm bad and I messed up. And this is what I did repeatedly in college and even into my young adulthood here in Tampa. And so what changed was Jasani said to judge your experience is to look at it and ask yourself, right? Ask yourself, why did I go to that party? Okay? And why, what mattered to me? Like, what was going on in my heart? And to ask those questions and then to make a judgment, right? And then to make a judgment of that was good or that was bad. But to not just like completely dismiss it because of this like guilt feeling, Catholic guilt feeling that I have, right?
Do you mean this for more gray area things, or are you saying for everything?
I think it can apply to everything. I really do. And I think that's important because obviously the Catholic Church's teachings are there to aid us in this, right? Mm-hmm. And so for things that are very clear, yes, to follow.
Like it's
right?
a layup, saying, it's bad, but you still analyze like, why did I do it?
Yeah. I'm not saying like go test everything, like go murder somebody, and so go find out if it feels good or bad. Okay, I'm not.
Yeah, to use that extreme example, though, like there's no judgment to be made on like was it good or bad that I just killed someone. Like but you do make judgment on like what led up to it, or
yes, exactly. And so and this is what we would do in like prison ministry with people that are like counselors, right? They would come in, nobody just wakes up and says I'm going to kill somebody, right? Like it doesn't get there, and so this is what people work through, and this is where our modern world has led to, and I think it's bringing Christ into the conversation into everything, right? And hopefully you can make judgments before you put yourself in situations that you're not supposed to put yourself in situations, but it can even be applied to things that are good, right? And which is a lot of discernment, right? A lot of discernment is between two goods, right? And I remember there was a principal that follows the movement, and she was talking on a Zoom call, and there were supposed to be students of hers that were going to help out with this event. And she got on the Zoom call to talk about the planning of the event, and she's like, actually, these three of the 6 students said they can't do it because of our big rival basketball game that's that same night. Okay. And they were like, oh man, you didn't like guilt them into this? That's what somebody said. And he said, no, I told them to make a judgment. I told them to say, oh, okay, go to the basketball game. And then after, like, tell me how it went. That's a good mentor right there. Like, that's not someone that's like guilting them and like, you're a terrible person because you're not doing the Catholic thing on the weekend. That's saying, okay, you've made a decision. You've made a decision, and because you've made a decision, don't go to that basketball game feeling guilty. Don't go to that basketball game feeling like a piece of crap because you didn't go do the other thing that maybe you're supposed to do or not. I don't know. But he's saying go and live life, live it well, and enjoy that, and then make a judgment afterwards. You've made a judgment before, hopefully, by discerning if this was the right thing or not. Mm-hmm. And then go live it well. Mm-hmm.
It seems like something though that can be really dicey unless you're like a already formed like Catholic. I could see this being like kind of dicey to teach to like a high schooler who might not fully understand their faith, who would just be like, oh, well, I'm going to go sleep with that girl and then I'll make a judgment.
No. So it's never diverting from the Catholic Church, right? It's never diverting from what the Catholic Church teaches. And I want to make that clear. There's clear teachings of the Catholic Church.
So never do anything that goes against the teachings.
Yeah, and the Catholic Church is, and Jesus is the one that's helping you make these judgments, right?
So it more so applies to things that are in like almost a moral gray area of like context could make it good or bad.
But even if you do make that mistake and go sleep with a girl, don't just say I'm a piece of crap.
Totally. Once you do it,
that's what it's also trying to get at, right? It's saying that like, okay, pay attention to why and like ask these questions because Christ is incarnate and is living within this situation.
Mm-hmm. And you do that in community.
In community, exactly. So if you do go sleep with that girl or you do go mess up and drink too many beers or whatever it is, like, okay, ask yourself and then bring that to community.
Yeah, because then even if you delude yourself that it was good, the community will be like, there no, to protect. It wasn't.
And it's aligned with the Catholic Church.
Yeah.
So it's not gonna divert from that.
Totally.
Yeah, I think a good example from, if I could tell like a story about.
I was just about to ask. I would love a story from your life if you're willing to share one.
Yeah, well, I think from teaching, things that I've seen with students of how I've applied this within teaching is, in my classroom last year with seniors, they were doing some kind of project, and I was playing Zach Bryan in the background, who I love, like one of my favorite country artists. So I'm playing Zach Bryan, playing his album, and then one of the kids is like, Mr. Phelan, do you not just like listen to Christian music? That's like what you're supposed to listen to? And I'm like, are you kidding me? It's like 90% of Christian music don't find very appealing, don't find very beautiful, right? I'm like, okay, good. And we started having a conversation about it, and and their perception of me, right, is this guy shows up to work, goes home, and like doesn't do anything, doesn't live anything fun, quote unquote, doesn't listen to any music or go watch movies or play video games or anything like that, right? Because their perception of the Catholic faith is this box thing that we talked about at the beginning of this podcast, is this thing that's like over there, right? And so we had this conversation of like, oh, no, like Zach Bryan is beautiful, and I think it actually points to God more than what a lot of Christian music does. Like, and it points to truths of life. You know, one of the opening songs that we just had our beginning day for Community Liberation. It's like the start of the year, and we do like a mini day retreat, and we sing songs, and they're not like explicitly Christian songs, which is like, I can already hear like one of our members in our community saying, "Oh, I can't believe you just said that," like, because this language we use, right? Like something's an explicitly Christian song. It's like we opened up the retreat with a Casey Musgrave song called "The Designer." It's like, and you know, and so some people that might be like, oh, that sounds like hippie stuff, right? Because it's like
it does.
It's like, oh, you're singing Casey Musgraves. It's like the song in itself has such expansive truth about life, right? There's a Zach Bryan poem called "The Road I Know" that I think has been one of the best examines at the end of my day that I've listened to probably 100 times, right? Talking about this road that he is on, that he's like, the road that I'm on, I don't know where it's going, but I know exactly where it's going. And he repeats this over and over again. It's a poem. There's this house at the end, and there's people inside. These people I don't know, but I know exactly who they are. Right? He's like, the music's playing. I don't know what the music is, but I know exactly what it is. And in a sense, what is this poem speaking to? Is it's just like this discernment that we're all on this like journey to heaven of like, we're end goal that all my students say, right? Because they know the right answer is heaven. Like, what is your purpose in life? Like, what does it mean to serve God in all things? Like all these things that I bring up with my students, right? They say heaven. They know the right answer, right? Mm-hmm. But that experience that Zach Bryan's expressing in a poem is saying, I know that there's an end goal. And maybe he's not even expressing, maybe he's not even talking about heaven. I don't know. But in his desires in his poem, in his lyrics, he's saying, I know that there's something that I'm going towards, right? I know that there's something I'm going towards, and I don't really know where I'm going, but because of this very fact that there is something, I know exactly where I am, right? Oh my gosh, that's completely profound, beautiful, and everything. And to just throw that out because it doesn't have the Zach Bryan explicitly Christian artist would just be absurd. Mm-hmm. To say that that's not something that Christ has, that Christ is present in.
It points to those arrows.
Yeah,
the arrows.
100%. And so Community Liberation has just opened my eyes to everything. There's a conference every year in New York. It's free. It's in downtown Manhattan. It's amazing. There's all these people that go to it, and it's a conference really of culture. Like they had last year, 2 journalists up on a panel, and one was a journalist for Palestine, and one was a journalist for Israel, right? And they're up there talking, having a conversation. One of the most tense things I've ever experienced, but also one of the most beautiful things I've experienced, because Community Liberation is not afraid to put those 2 people on a stage. Because Christ isn't afraid of that, right? The church is not afraid of that, right? And if we were like, oh, we have this explicit message that we have to like focus on, right? And we can only have Catholic speakers come up here. Because like, what if they say something that's not Catholic? What are we afraid of? Like, we can't be afraid as Christians, like that, because we have this belief that anything that is true is of Christ. Anything that is beautiful is of Christ. You know, anything that is one is of Christ. Mm-hmm. And so if these 2 people are up there trying to discuss what they think is true and are trying to get to the truth of this massive problem in the Middle East, like, okay, that's a good conversation to have, right? Mm-hmm. And so I think that's another example of where I was just blown away by the beauty of the movement, that it's not afraid of anything.
Mm-hmm. You seem to touch on this for a second, and we're on an education podcast. We're probably 50 minutes in, 40 minutes in. What does this have to do with education? You're an educator. You're passionate about this communion liberation thing. You touched on it in your class about specifically like mentoring them in that way. But like, yeah, what does it mean to bring this into the classroom?
Yeah, I think it's made me such a better teacher because it doesn't make me afraid of certain type of students. And the thing in the past, it would be like, I'm only going to go talk to those Catholic kids, or I'm only going to care about those, like, and I'm going to be scared to talk to the baseball player that has no faith, or the kid that I know goes to a bunch of parties on the weekends, or whatever. Like, I think in the past I would have been hesitant to try to have a conversation with that with that kid, because the only thing I would be caring about is like, is this kid Catholic? Does this kid know Jesus? That's it. That'd be my only concern, and therefore I'd be terrified because they don't. But in reality, with this new lens, they do in everything that they do, right? They have plenty experiences of truth, beauty, goodness, right? They have plenty of experiences of unity that they experience winning a championship on the baseball team, right? They have plenty of experiences of beauty being on Jesuits campus every day and being in that chapel every single day, right? All these things are already present. And for me to then just say like, oh, they don't know Jesus, so I can't have a conversation with them, it's made me such a better teacher in a sense of I can enter into, I feel like, any conversation and relate to any kid because I'm not afraid.
You almost sound liberated.
Yeah. There we go. We're figuring out the words. We're figuring it out. There we go. Yes. We made it. Yeah. So I think it's definitely made me a better teacher. It's helped me so much in conversations with kids. Like, I had a kid over the summer on our pilgrimage that said he's a senior discerning which college to go to, and he was discerning his major. And he was like, Mr. Phelan, I think I want to go to dental school, but like they make a lot of money. And I was like, wait, and what? And why is that a problem? And he's like, shouldn't I, like, do you think I should go do something like holy? Like, should I go be like a teacher like you, or should I like go work at a church? And I'm like, whoa. Like, and then ask the question, like, why do you want to be a dentist? Like, why? And I'm like, is it because it makes a lot of money? And he's like, no, I don't think so. I think it's and he's like, and this was beautiful. This kid had such a good perspective on this. He's like, I don't think so. I think, and he was honest too. He's like, but that's a great thing. Like, that was a great perk of it.
Sounds nice.
Sounds nice. And which is, the kid's being real and he's being honest. But he's like, no, my dad is a dentist. And I think he's really happy with his family. Like, he seems to have a really good balanced family life. And I'm like, this kid is judging. This is exactly what the movement has taught me. Like, this kid is judging all of the circumstances in front of him of like, I want to be a dentist because of these reasons. And I'm holding all of it. Like, he's not ignoring the fact that it makes a lot of money, right? He's like, that's also part of it too, right? And then he brings this question of like, oh, but am I supposed to do like this quote unquote like holy thing? And I'm like, oh no, like, we need holy dentists. Like, we need people that are holy doctors and lawyers, and we need those holy people as well. And like, you will bring Christ to your profession. Like, Christ is incarnate in that profession. And so I think maybe in the past I would have been a little bit more on the side of like, oh, well, maybe have you considered like being a youth minister? Like, you would be pretty good at it. Like, have you thought about it? I might have gone down that road with him. And this time it wasn't even a hesitation. Like, it was so clear to me of like, no, go be a dentist. Go be a really good dentist. And like, you seem like your priorities are aligned here. Like, you want to do it because you want to have a family. You want to support a family. You enjoy what your dad does. You enjoy going into your dad's practice. Good. Follow that. Follow that.
So he was almost liberated to do this thing through the community of you and him talking about it.
Yes, you are. You're figuring it out. You're absolutely figuring it out.
We're getting somewhere.
You are. Exactly. Yes. He's free, right? He's not bound by this perception of what he thinks God wants for him, like this perception. But yet he is free to see God in all things. Jesuit right there. Jesuit shout out.
Do you have any stories from your own life that you'd be willing to share about using this to make judgment? You can say no to this and we'll just cut this question out if you don't want to get too personal about it. But I would love to hear like things or decisions or just
I'm trying to think of decisions.
points in your life that you're willing to share on a public podcast that you came to from community liberation.
I think my decision from moving from academy to Jesuit was a really big decision for me, and one that I think, like, without community liberation, I don't think I would have been able to make well.
Really?
And I think the reason why is that I saw at times like this feeling of academy of like, oh, I'm abandoning academy. Like I'm like trying to help out. Like there's a lot of girls that appreciate that I'm here. A lot of students that are here that appreciate that I'm here, and like appreciate these conversations we have and these relationships that I'm building, right? And I almost felt like guilty leaving that, right? And then through constantly bringing this up at community liberation, through constantly judging that feeling and judging that experience, I really felt this call to Jesuit, this movement towards Jesuit, for my own sanctity, like for my own holiness, and also the beautiful thing of doing work with your friends. Like there's a lot of good people that work at Jesuit, and the leader kept emphasizing, a friend of mine at community liberation kept emphasizing that. It's like, what a beauty it would be to work with your friends. I was like, I'm not discerning that. That's not a part of the discernment. But he kept emphasizing it, right?
Yeah, but it's a real thing.
And I'm like, wow, then that's actually really true.
Mm-hmm.
It's made me a much happier person. It's made me, and it's not that I didn't have good friends at Academy. It's just these are people that really care for me and that also are part of the movement. There's like 5 or 6 employees at Jesuit that are part of the movement of community liberation. And so like to be able to do your work with people that have that same perception, that same charism as you is a beautiful gift. And then to follow that was beautiful, and like to talk through that and to get perspectives that I didn't really have before. And ultimately Christ like led me to Jesuit. I remember sitting down as a little side change, but sitting down at adoration the day before I had to make the decision. And I sat down in adoration, and I was like, Jesus, I don't know how you're going to tell me which way to go here. I was really feeling 50-50. I was like, Jesus, I don't know how this is going to work. Like, how are you going to tell me anything in this hour of prayer? And so right when I made that prayer, I'm not even joking, it was a minute later, I received a phone call, and I was like, I feel like I need to take this. And so I walked out of the chapel, and it was Father Hermes, the president at Jesuit, and he was calling me, who I had only had one conversation with before, had not talked to expansively about this decision. And he said, hey, I think I heard you're really struggling with this idea of teaching, because the movement to Jesuit was moving out of campus ministry into full-time teaching. I said, yeah. And he's like, I heard you're really struggling with the idea of teaching, and I just want to encourage you, and I want to say that I think you'd be a really good teacher here. I think you'd really enjoy teaching. And I was like, well, there we go. There's our sign. Here we are. And that was about it. Like the rest of the adoration was just thanksgiving. Like, okay, we're going to Jesuit. Like, here we go. And it was, and it was still like paying attention to the fear of leaving academy behind. It was still paying attention to the reality of teaching and the fear of being a full-time teacher for the first time. All these fears were still there. And I think in the past I would have just buried those fears and just like, put your head down, go be a good teacher.
Yeah, those fears are evil. That's Satan trying to tempt you away from being a teacher.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And so there's a lot of things like it's like no, but okay, but pay attention to them, why they're there, and then move forward. So I think I was very thankful to be in the movement while that decision was happening, because it was very helpful. I feel like I talked about it every week. It was very helpful to judge that decision with people and to judge that decision with the help of Jasani in his works. Yeah.
So as we're wrapping up here, what would be Pat Phelan's 2-step, 3-step, 5-step, whatever guide to employing these good practices in your own life as a Catholic? As an educator in particular.
As an educator in particular, I would say step 1, begin judging your life. Judge your life.
Step 1, judge your life.
Step 1, judge your life, pay attention to everything. Pay attention to your work, pay attention to your family life, pay attention to those students in your classroom. Pay attention.
Okay.
Did I say pay attention or did I say judge?
I think either one is fine. I think in the proper context. Like,
well, one. Okay, here you go. We're backtracking again.
Okay, great. Step one.
Step one, pay attention. Pay attention to your life. Pay attention to everything going on. 2, make a judgment. Make a judgment on what's going on. And make a judgment in community, with people, with friends, with people you trust. And then ultimately make that judgment with the Catholic Church, right? The Catholic Church, this is why we're in communion with the Catholic Church. And then 3rd, as an educator, is to not be afraid to like live freely within your classroom, to live life well in your classroom, to not be afraid of any student, right? And to be afraid that maybe that kid isn't Catholic, or that kid wants to talk out and share something different, or he wants to share his counterpoint of what he believes. Like, don't be afraid of any of those conversations. To welcome them, because they really make life worth living. They make life interesting, and to really see everything as an opportunity to encounter the truth, to encounter beauty, to encounter goodness, and to ultimately try to point your students to those things. That would be my last. And 3 was kind of long with that point A, point B, point C. But three,
the real teacher. It's only 3 steps with 14 sub-steps.
But yeah, 3B would just be point your kids to truth, to goodness, to beauty, to unity. Point them to those things, and in any place that they're at, point them to that, and you'll lead your kids to Christ for sure.
Great. All right. Well, honestly, Pat, thank you so much for coming on. This has been actually very informative. Hopefully, everyone at home understands what community liberation is now. Well, no, that's about it. We're just going to wrap it up.
Sweet.
We have a thing where at the end of the podcast, we'll both clap at the same time to end it out.
Nice.
And we are out.